Hi, John Morgan here, and you may not have seen me online very much this last week, and that's because I've been really sick. Consequently, that means I'm a little bit behind on where I plan to be with my garden this spring. I've got one bed ready here. This is going to be peas. But today I've got to prep the other beds and get them planted because right before I got sick, I bought a flat of plants with the intention of planting them. And I've been trying to nurse them and myself along this last week, and we're both a little bit worse for the wear. But today I'm going to get cracking with cleaning up these beds. If I get time, I'm going to tackle some more of this mulch mess that I've been dealing with really all winter. Again, ground cloth of mulch, huge mistake. Never do it. I knew what I was getting into when I did it, and now I'm regretting every second of it. So, with that said, let's go ahead and get started. Yeah, ground cloth. Whoever designed it. So the first step in this bed is going to be tackling any big weeds. Just kind of scraping it down to bare soil. Now that I have this bed scraped off, it's time to come in and really till it up. And the method that I use is kind of a double dig method. I'm going to go through, create a trench on this end, kind of chuck that dirt that direction toward the end down that way. And then I'm just going to fill back into my trench and work my way down toward that end of the bed. So, see this corner right here where I missed with the hoe, which, you know, you can just sort of disregard that. So this you only need to do like every couple of years, or if you've had a bed like me where it's set for a while and it hasn't been used, you really want to break up any deep growth that's going on. So things like this big old pokeweed right here, that's something I definitely don't want coming back up, so I want to make sure that I get as much of that root as possible, because if any of this root survives, it's going to keep coming up. And then we're also looking for things like rocks. Very seldom do I find rocks in this soil. This soil was actually fill dirt from up at where we built our newest greenhouse. It just so happened the landscaper that I called to get soil, that's where he got the soil from. So yeah, I've got a little bit of Bob's Market right here in my backyard. So as I said, you know, once you go through and do that initial trench, now I'm just moving the dirt over a space. Oh man, ground moles or something right there. All right, there's a plant tag. It's a Petunia Itsy White. I have never grown that, so again, this made it in here from Bob's. Ironically, I may or may not have printed that. I don't know. That's kind of funny. Oh, there's another pokeweed. Looks like it was already mostly dried up and dead though. Another thing too, if you don't have a lot of upper body strength, digging like this can get tiring. Don't be afraid to use your foot, you know. That's why that's there on shovels. I'm just kind of feeling the soil as I go. And if I hit a particularly rough spot, I'll hit it with my boot. But for the most part, this soil, I mean, you can see it's kind of the perfect consistency right now for gardening. It's not too wet, it's not too dry, it's breaking apart just nicely. Right there was a little extra something. Ooh. Use my footing and fall over there. I know what I'm hitting now. This petunias might have been mine. The first year I built these raised beds, before I put dirt in them, I used this bed as a compost pile. So before it even had soil in it, I was putting junk in the bottom, and then I put the soil over top. So that's why I'm digging up there that's deep. Sometimes tilling up a bed can turn into an archaeological dig. Kind of rediscover stuff that you've done in the past. That first year I gardened in these beds, I had tomatoes in this one. I decided to make a tomato trellis. I just screwed it to the sides of the bed. What I failed to consider was the weight of the tomatoes in the summertime. And eventually the sides of the bed started to cave in. So that winter I had to come out, dig along the edges, and repair this bed. The nice thing about raised beds like this is they are easy to repair. That took some time, but I've got all the garden beds cleaned out. Of course, the mulch is still a mess, but we'll tackle that in another video. Up first, I'm going to plant this bed, and this bed, I use it as a little bit of a combination. So I've got plants in half of it, and then the half down there, the last couple years I've used as a compost bin. And that's because when I filled up these beds, this bed was a little bit low on soil. So I've been doing that to kind of increase the amount of soil in this bed and also enrich it. So my plan is, once this bed gets nice and full, I'll move on to another and make part of it my compost bin. Anyhow, in the other half of this bed, I am going to be planting my onion sets. And what I like to do is I plant them kind of densely together in rows. And what I do is early on in the springtime, I harvest them for green onions. So a lot of people plant rows so they'll have onion bulbs in the fall. What I like to do is I go through and kind of thin them out for green onions, and then a few of them get left behind and they'll bulb by fall. And of course, when you're planting onion sets, I've done videos on it before. There's a bad one, but every onion set has a top and bottom. It's pretty obvious, especially with one like this where it already has a little sprout. But you've got a root end and then the top. So ideally you want to have it so the top is facing up. And I space them about 2 inches apart. Again, I'm going to go through and thin these out later. Nope. I just planted like 4 right there in one spot. So here's a good example of one that's already sprouted. So when you're planting them, you want to go root end down, what will be the sprout up toward the top. Okay, I'm going to cover these over, and I think I'm going to have enough room. I can sneak one more row in there. I was a pretty good judge this year. Normally I buy way too many onion sets. So when I made these rows, I just took my hoe and pushed the soil that way. So now all I have to do is just rake it back over the top of them. You don't have to go too deep. I'm going maybe, oh, I don't know, maybe a ½ inch to an inch above the top of the onion set. That one's up a little high there. I can just grab it and kind of push it down in. If you get a big clump like that, you just grab it and break it up. Of course, I left my hoe all the way over at the pickup truck, so I don't want to cover up this last row because I don't want to forget where it's at. Go grab the hoe. Okay, I'll use a little piece of mulch there to mark where that is. Last row here, I'll just jam a bunch in. It'll be the first one that I thin out. All right. I'll move my little stick down here to mark this first row. There we go. Up next we have one of my spring favorites, and that is peas. So right now we're still having frost, but you can plant peas. They can survive a light frost, and right here on the package it says to plant 2 weeks before the last frost. So I might be pushing it a little bit, but I think I'm going to be okay. I mean, the name of this variety is Snowbird after all. That being said, I do have two different types of peas here. The Snowbird variety, they're a snap pea. So they grow up and you harvest the entire pod to eat. This variety is called Green Arrow, and it's a shelling pea. So once it matures, you shell it out and you get little individual peas to eat. So you want to keep that in mind when you're picking pea varieties to grow. So I've got enough seeds here. I'm going to do 2 sets of Snowbird and then 1 set of Green Arrow. And the way that you plant peas is a little bit unique. So you plant them in kind of groups 6 inches apart. So I've got 2 rows here, 6 inches apart, then about 1.5 to 2 feet of spacing in between your next set of 2 rows, and then the same. So I've got 3 sets right here, so I'm going to have 2 Snowbird and then 1 of Green Arrow. And on the spacing, you want to go about 2 to 3 inches apart with your seeds. So I'll go ahead and chuck that down there, put that one there, and that way I can kind of space these evenly out. But what I'm doing first is I'm making sure that at least I've got a seed 3 inches apart. And then what I'm going to do is come back and actually double seed it. And that way I'm just giving a little bit of extra protection for myself in case the seed doesn't germinate or in case a critter gets it. I can already hear the birds discussing their plans. So, yeah. So I might end up with enough of the Snowbird left over that I can save some in the event that I have blank spaces. Like if, say, a bird or a rabbit gets the seeds, I can come back in and fill back in. Or if I'm brave in the fall, I could plant a late crop of peas. Of course, the last time I tried that, I got them in the ground a little bit too late. And I had beautiful blooms on them, but then we got a killing freeze. So as I was saying, these are frost tolerant, but if we do get a really hard freeze, I'll have to kind of monitor the weather from here on out. And if we're expecting to get, you know, like super cold temperatures, I've got tarps and plastic that I can bring out here and put over my beds. So yeah, I've just got like 3 or 4 seeds left here, and I'm just going to kind of chuck them randomly. You know, the more the merrier. There we go. And right now, I'm just sort of keeping mental track of where I put everything. I did make a diagram. I've already kind of altered my plans today of where I'm going to put stuff. But what I do is I keep a database in my phone and on the computer of where I put everything. That way I can track it through the season, what replaces this crop later in the summer, etc. You know, I can track all of that directly on my phone. So my plan that I kind of wrote out in my notebook, that's just sort of a general rule of thumb for me planning in the springtime. So it's in no way set in stone. And you know, that always kind of changes the moment you get to the store and start looking at seeds, start looking at what seeds you have on hand, and also what plants are available. All right, in this bed, I am planting kale on this end and then Brussels sprouts on that end. And I'm doing a variety of kale called Snowboar and Jade Cross Early Brussels sprouts. You can see some yellowing, and there is a little bit of crispiness to these leaves, and that's because they got a little kiss of frost the other night. I had these setting out on my front patio, and yeah, they got a little bit of frost. But that's the thing with cold weather crops. They can take it. This, you know, I mean, they'll grow past this. There's already fresh leaves sprouting out down below. It won't hurt them one bit. So don't be afraid to plant things like kale and Brussels sprouts right now. If you get a little bit of yellowing on the leaves like this, it's just a little bit of frost damage. It's nothing to worry about. So I'm going to go ahead and get these planted. The way that I'm going to plant these is I have 8 of each. So I'm going to do like 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And kind of space them that way. I think that spacing will work best for airflow and also give the plants enough room to grow, because kale does get rather large. By the time it's ready to be harvested, I mean, the plant's going to be about like that. So you kind of have to take that into consideration when you're planting these. Oh! And there just wet my knees. So you can see there where I pulled this out, beautiful healthy leaf down below there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop all of these out and then kind of go back and figure out the spacing. might help to look at the tag too. Yeah, the spacing's the same on them. So oh. I think that actually might look pretty good. I think I have the kale spaced a little bit further apart, but in my own experience it gets a little bit larger. So I think I'm going to be safe with this layout. And what I'm going to do is take 2 of these tags, stick them in a safe place. That way I've got the information later to put into my database. In it, I have a column for days to maturity, and then what it does is it calculates from the plant date of either when it was seeded or transplanted. It calculates forward to an approximate harvest date, and then that helps me plan crop rotations for what will go in the place of these plants later in the summer. So you have to kind of play the long game when you're planting a spring garden, because you're thinking ahead to what you're going to be growing in the summertime. So I look at what I'm planting in beds and what I want to have there later on, because I also rotate my crops. For example, I had tomatoes in this bed a few years ago. I'm going to move tomatoes over there this year. The last of my plants are right here. I have Destiny broccoli, amazing cauliflower, some early flat Dutch cabbage, and some Ruby Perfection cabbage. So these, I know that they do get quite big and take up some space, so I'm just going to do, 8 and 8. And with my cabbage, I try to do 2 different varieties that mature at different rates. And that way I get 4 heads that are pretty much ready within about the same time. Like I can usually harvest a couple one week, then a couple the next. And then a few weeks later, I'll have 4 more ready to harvest. And that way I'm just not inundated with a tsunami of cabbage all at once. And it also allows for better crop rotation planning later on. Once this flat Dutch finishes, I could take it out. I'll probably put like summer squash or something like that there. And then once the Ruby is out, I could put another squash there that'll be coming in about the time that the first one's finishing up. So again, you're kind of planning into the summer and planning for crop rotation. So, well, let's go ahead and get these planted. And then my last bed here behind me is more seeds. It's leaf lettuce and radishes. And again, these got a little bit frosty, but they are just fine. Get them in here, hit them with some water, and they'll be as happy as little clams. In fact, I even have this little guy here that kind of a late sprouter. So I'll come back here in a little bit before I start mowing grass and hit these with the watering can. We do have rain forecast for tomorrow, so I don't have to worry too much about really soaking them down because they should get watered in pretty good tomorrow if the forecast holds out. Look at how quickly those went in. If you have seen how long it took me to till up this bed, 98% of the work that I've done here today has been prep work. Get down there and I'll work that way. I find that giant night crawler I saw here earlier. That thing was huge. I thought it was a snake. Alright, so the last thing that I have to plant here this evening is my radishes and lettuce, and I'm growing them all from seed. Now, with planting both of these, they can be a little bit tricky because if you look at the planting depth, it says 1/8 of an inch. How in the heck do you plant something 1/8 of an inch deep in this type of soil? Well, I'll show you my method of doing it, and it's pretty simple, and you're letting nature do most of the work. So what I like to do is I kind of dig out a shallow trough, and then I scatter my seeds in that trough, and then I'll just lightly kind of rake over it, and then I'll water it in. And what happens is, as it rains, you gradually get erosion and a little bit of soil washing in over top of the seeds, helping to cover them. So it's really the best way that I've found to get a nice consistent germination all throughout a row. So I've got these 3 rows right here done. I'm going to make these my radish rows. So I've got 3 different varieties. I have Scarlet Globe, Champion, and a variety called China Rose. And I'm not going to go in any particular order, so I'm going to do China Rose. I'll put the Champions in the middle and the Scarlet Globes here. Now, my leaf lettuce, I know it tends to spread a little bit, so I'm going to spread those rows out a little bit more. So all that I do to make my row is I just take my hoe and start raking. And it also gives you a good opportunity to clear out any junk that you might have missed, like these roots. I can kind of pick through and clean up the row as I go. And then I do end up with a little pile at each end, but it'll work back in over time. It's nothing to worry about. Kind of split the difference here. I don't want to have that last row like butted right up against the edge of the bed. Which this end had some funky weeds growing in it. I really had to work on it. Yeah, you can see that clump there. Tried to scrape through this with a pitchfork, but still didn't get everything. And we do our best, and then nature will do the rest in breaking that stuff down. Alright. Got Butter Crunch, Green Ice, and Little Jim. These two look really leafy, so I think I'm going to go leafy, leafy, and Little Jim in the middle. That way we don't get too crowded. Okay, so now when it comes to planting my seeds, it's just as simple as scattering the seeds out through here and then raking a little bit of soil over top of them. Now, with lettuce seeds, radishes are a little bit bigger, but with lettuce seeds, they're really tiny. So what I like to do is I dump them all out in the palm of my hand, which you don't want to do on a windy day. Luckily the wind has let up. It was crazy here earlier. Got a couple more in there. I'll flick those out in a bit. And then we're just going to scatter. Almost like you're seasoning a dish or something. My eyes are bad. If you're a little bit younger, you know, you might be able to see the seeds in there. You see a centipede right there that just went crawling by. There's a root there that needs pulled. So I'm just kind of keeping track mentally, trying to at least, of where I've already dropped seeds. And these I can actually see a little bit, so I'm not going totally blind. But now that I've got them in here, I'm just going to go in with my fingers and just very lightly go like that. And one more time for good measure. And that's it. I just planted that row of seeds. Except for that last couple right there. There we go, got those. And when I opened this, I was careful that I didn't tear the top off. And then I also preserved the back. And that way I've got it for my notes. So, there we have it. That is my spring garden planted. Now I need to go in, sit down, enter all of this into my database that I have, which, by the way, I use a free app. I'm not endorsing it or anything. We're not sponsored or anything like that, but it's an app called Airtable, and they have a free version. I use it for a ton of different stuff, and it's really helpful because you can create a bunch of different tools like a garden planner. And yeah, I find that it is really helpful to keep track of my garden in database format because that's what I work with every day. If not, you might want to use a garden journal. And I also use a paper journal. So that is a perfectly acceptable route also. In fact, we have our own Bob's Market gardening journals. We just got a few printed, so we're kind of soft launching it. So in the near future, I'm going to be doing a giveaway over on our website for your very own copy of our Bob's Market Gardening Journal. And well, until next time, keep growing.